right. Welcome to the Infinite
Welcome.
Wisdom series.
1 second here and figure out where this is going to show up. There it is. Yes. Perfect. All right. Welcome, everyone, to another interview on the Infinite Wisdom series. So, back in January, Gary and I did a 4-part live stream about the power of words. And our guest today is a follow-up to that series, in a sense, taking it to the next level. So since she first posted her 2 most pivotal YouTube videos back in 2010, The Secret Spells of the English Language and her WordMagic anthem, Taking Command of the English Language, people around the world have become more deeply interested in how ordinary words and the letters that compose them can harbor a hidden agenda that plays us like a human instrument. Her name is Laurel Airica, and she is a linguistics evolutionary educational entertainer. And so that just really opens up the doors there. And she's also the creator of the WordMagic Global, a wordplay that unravels mass hypnosis and elevates the frequency of consciousness. So here's the thing. Laurel also enjoys pointing out that she refers to the sacred PathWords, the many everyday words that quietly reflect our innate wisdom back to us. Then there are the obscure English words that can enhance our sense of human possibilities. Through the work she shares in verse and prose, she endeavors to inspire people everywhere to play with words in ways that can make us all smarter, wiser, kinder, more literate, witty, and kind. So ultimately, Laurel's goal is to foment a linguistic revoltage in which we collectively, creatively, and quite rapidly elevate the amperage of the English language to accelerate awakenings and facilitate our essential evolutionary leap from humankind to human kindness. That's awesome. That's awesome. Laurel, welcome. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here with you both and with your audience.
Yeah.
All right.
And those of you that are chiming in, Demetrius, haven't seen you forever, buddy.
Oh my gosh, dude. Oh, fantastic.
And we got Maggie from Germany. I love linguistics and playing Scrabble. Nice. Those of you that are chiming in and listening, let us know where you're chiming in from so we can kind of see the global reach. This is a great topic and one dear to my heart and Ross's heart. And again, that's why we put so much effort in those 4 episodes in January, wasn't it, or February?
January.
Yeah. And so let's see where we can take this today. If you guys have any questions as we're going along for us or for our guests, then please just throw it in the comments. We will be chiming back, and we're going to try to make this interactive today. So let's have you guys play full out, and let's see where we go. We want to, hopefully our intention here is to touch you in some powerful way that you can leave here a little bit more lightened up.
Laurel, tell us about yourself a little bit. How did you get so involved in words and in the passion of
I started out very, very early. I spoke early, and I do remember announcing to my parents at the age of 3 or 4 that I bet I now know all the words in the English language. And my mother said, I bet you don't, and spoke a word I'd never heard. And I said, well, what language was that? And at about 6 years old, I started questioning the alphabet. Who said A, B, C, D? Where did that come from? But all of these seemed to me like stupid questions. I was questioning a given that no one noticed, let alone remarked upon. And I just was operating on a different frequency than the people around me. And it didn't go well, but it sure...
It rarely does.
Yes. But it sure ultimately led me to focus on words, and in many cases to cloister myself and just spend hours playing with them, and finding a new word or a new rhyme just would set me up for such an exciting day. Just feeling it and hearing it would rock my world. And so I have a big collection of really interesting words. And I wrote a thesis about them, a manuscript in the 80s called Psychosemantics, English in Translation. And I showed it to an editor at a publishing house who thumbed through it in a rather indifferent manner and said, well, this is all quite interesting and consistent with semiotics and deconstructionism, which I'd never heard of. But he told me, excuse me, he told me that without a PhD, the power of letters after your name, without those letters, I had no credibility to say what I say. And the other, I'm so sorry. I think this is the first I've been speaking today. I woke up quite early and then just was working on a blog I just about completed that answers these questions, and it's called, let me find its title because I like what I've settled on. It's called Being of Sound Mind, How WordMagic Wordplay Saved My Sanity, Awakened Jeepers, I'm so sorry, you guys. I should have practiced speaking. Anyway, how WordMagic Wordplay saved my sanity, awakened my awareness to the matrix of this reality and what it might possibly do for you.
Wow.
So my life situation was a perfect setup to focus on what I'm sure I came here to do, and reinforcing that conviction and why I thought at such an early age that I knew all the words in the language. I read many years later in a book called Healing Mantras by Ashley Farrand, that in the court of Queen Elizabeth I, the wisest, most educated man in the arts and sciences, as well as the esoteric arts and sciences, was John Dee. And there was the belief at the time that structured metered verse paired with music could calm hostilities. So he was working with a cabal of French and English poets, working in that sort of verse to create like a secret weapon for world peace. And when I read that, I thought I was there. And that's why I thought at such an early age that I knew the language backward and forward. And I've done a lot of turning it backward. And that's what I encourage other people to do. For instance, I call it turning it inside out and back.
Man, I do this all the time. Oh my gosh, I love this. Go ahead.
Well, I want to hear some of what you discovered, Gary, but I want to share a little story and then I think your audience will quickly catch on to this. I was thinking once that any metaphysical philosophy, if you don't understand it, is dogma. And if you do understand it, is unnecessary. So I looked at dogma. I always found it to be a very odd word, and then it revealed its secret to me. So why don't we invite listeners to take a few moments just to look at dogma inside out and backward and see what you can learn about it.
Okay, do you want to take the lead on that?
Are you speaking of me,
Yeah.
to me or to Gary? I just took the lead. The lead was I offered the invitation. Look at the word dogma, turn it inside out and backward and see what you
So
find.
meaning the letters, rearranging letters?
Yeah, do whatever you want. Take that little word. And I've given a big hint. And I'll let you know in just a moment.
Okay. So, I mean, if you split it apart, you got dog, ma, but then if you switch the dog, it's God. And if you move the ma to beginning, it's ma God. What else could you do with it? Or go mad.
Anybody in the audience texting in?
Deb's got am God.
That's it. Once you know that's who you are, you don't need any
Nice.
prescriptions.
There you go.
Which is backwards, right? So it's spelled backwards. It's nice. Okay,
Yeah,
nice.
that was the hint. Turned it inside out and
Nice.
backward. Yeah. I've long considered this dimension of existence to be backward land. And I wrote my extensive fairyography as an elemental being who goes through the looking glass into this dimension and has to deconstruct the language to find her way out back home again. And so early on, she says, I was born in upside down town to the king and queen of backward land. I spoke a foreign language, which they had to twist to understand. The king was sowing sorrow and the queen was reaping grief. I held my dreams, but lost my way, confused beyond belief. So I've long thought of this dimension of existence as backward land. And then I was delighted once to find this statement in the introduction to a book called The Way of Weird, Tales of an Anglo-Saxon Sorcerer. And this introduction by Dr. Fred Wolfe says, when the Christians came to power in Britain, anything heathen was automatically banned. Consequently, everything that had a strong meaning to the Anglo-Saxons was reversed 180 degrees. And when I read that, I thought, there it is, there's backward land. And it concludes by saying this reversal not only affected the people and their traditions, but also the English language we use today.
That's cool. So that's interesting because I mean, when and that's definitely a new twist on it for me. When I say I do the flipping inside out back, what I do is I look at like the meaning of words. So for example, you know, and I've taught this on different streams before, you know, just a simple thing of understanding the meaning of a simple sentence and how it can have such ambiguity in every aspect of it.
Yes.
And in order for us to process the understanding, we have to take in all of the ambiguity meanings and then come out with something that's going to relate with those around us. So for example, you know, the looking forward to the weekend, right? So we just take those two words, right? Then what we're doing is we're looking forward to the ambiguity of week, which is, you know, we consider 7 days of the week, right? Which is a whole other ambiguity in that. And then we say, okay, well, then that there's no strength, right? Weak means no strength, means lack of power, right? So why would you look forward to that on a regular basis, right? And then end, you know, the definition and the understanding of that is the something coming to a completion. So it's there's all this ambiguity in our languaging that if we were to understand that we don't just take the surface information of the language we read or hear, we take in all of it, and then after it's processed, then we got to come back out and filter out what's agreed upon with those around us in the matrix that we're experiencing, right? So for me, I say, okay, well, so the backwards part of it, what I do is I say, well, what's the opposite of weak? Well, it's strong or empowered, or, you know, so then what I say is, well, have a good, strong beginning instead of a good weekend. Right? So I'm taking, you're doing, though, is very cool. We're actually taking the words themselves and looking at from that layer of the matrix, which is really cool. I like that. And to add that into the mix of things, I think that's pretty cool. So I like the deconstructing of the language, and even morning, right? Have a good morning. Well, ambiguity of morning has a couple different meanings to it, right? So why would you want to have a good one when every time you're waking up? So have a good awakening.
Well, when we say to each other, good morning, we're essentially saying good grief on a subliminal level.
Right.
And in terms of weekend and strong beginning, my sense of things is for tuning up words. I believe we need to evolve the language through the invention of new words and metaphors, but also tuning up familiar ones. And so what I've done with weekend is strengthened. And I once asked a group of people in my secret spells of the English language, that first video is when I go through what I call our premier life sentence, which includes those words that you're citing. And I point out that our most prevalent greeting to each other is hello. And if you reverse the syllables, you have oh hell. So I once asked a group of people, what shall we do about this? And this woman, who was fittingly a midwife, said, how about hallow? Nice. And to hallow is to honor as sacred. And each one of us is as the infinite, infinite form. Each one of us is sacred. And that little tuning up, that's what we're doing here now for all of us on this evolutionary journey. We're doing our best to tune up our frequency, to be vibrating at a higher level so that we're resonating with goodness, beauty, love, kindness, wisdom. And it just comes to us, embodies in us, flows through us, and we all lift each other together.
So Laurel, where do these oddities originate from? And how do they spread into, integrate themselves into, so deeply into a language?
Okay, let me get to that in just a moment. So the question is, how do these peculiarities pop up in language? And the two that are most familiar to most people, where words speak for themselves and reflect us back to ourselves, are the two words dis-ease. And we go, oh, right, stress equals the greater chance for illness. And the other is history, or his story. And we recognize, oh, right, it's not just a factual accounting of events, it's the victor's telling of the tale. It's very propagandistic and self-serving, but not so accurate. So, and that gives me an opportunity for, in terms of how do these things arise? Yes, I do believe some of them are manipulated and concocted, and I think others are naturally occurring, because I believe that we are, as speakers of this language, or any language, is like a hall of mirrors and an echo chamber. It's constantly inputting and outputting within and from us, and it's echoing and mirroring, as far as I can see at the moment, echoes or mirrors either cultural consciousness or higher consciousness. So the words that reverberate with cultural consciousness, I generally call those secret spells, because they're hiding one of these ambiguities that you were talking about, Gary. So the secret spells are the ones that resonate with cultural consciousness, and they program our thinking. The word is the lens through which we see the world, and as we see it, so be it. Yeah. We are creating through our perceptions and our thoughts and verbalizations. And I just want to step back for a moment. Gary, when you talked about ambiguity, I took a course when I was at the university, Berkeley in the 60s, a wonderful historic moment. So I had a course in structural English grammar, and the professor said this will neither improve your speaking ability or your writing, but it's interesting. And he spoke about the 7 forms of ambiguity. And one that I remember best was he said his favorite, the lyrics from his favorite Calypso song was, I kiss her hands, I kiss her lips, and I leave her behind for you. So that's a little fun joke. And
I got that. I don't know if everybody got that, but I totally got that.
Okay. Well, so I'll say it with a different intonation. I kiss her hands.
You got to do the structural ambiguity on that.
And I leave her behind for you to kiss. So yes, we can be saying many different things using the same collection of words. And when I took a master's degree program in spiritual psychology from the University of Santa Monica, which is not Santa Monica College, but there was often a message to us that the message sent is not the message received. So we can think that we're agreeing upon something that's contained in a verbal vibration and yet be miles apart. And so it's so easy for me to go on and on. So raise your hand and let me know.
No, we're getting tons of comments, and so everybody's loving it. Their words have power, changing vibration, physical environment. Words are spells. One of the things I say regularly is that the words you use are either declaring the reality you're in, or they're in the process of invoking the reality you're stepping into.
Oh, I like that. That's very good.
Right. So it's you're either declaring. So, people say that's the power of it, right? So they're either declaring the crap they're in or the good they're in. They're declaring it when they talk about it, or they're invoking that reality to step in. So really to be careful of the words you use.
Yes. Well, and that then circles round to what else I wanted to say. And I'll get back to the bigger question, Ross, about these quirky idiosyncrasies in language that most of us thought were limited to the words dis-ease and his story, not recognizing that the word is constantly speaking back to us. So how do these quirky things happen? Yes, certainly they're implanted like sound bites, but not the good ones. I think those just naturally arise. But sound bites like defund the police. Now, we know that isn't what it means. It means reallocate resources. But somehow that sound bite was injected, picked up, and projected widely, even though it's guaranteed to start an argument.
Right. Sure.
So what a waste of breath. And there's quite a few others. And
we talk about this in, I think it was in the word series that we did, just even using the word imagination. We break that up. It's magi nation, and magi is we're a nation of magicians.
That is wonderful. I completely agree. And collectively, we have the power to turn this life stream. We are co-creating moment by moment, waking and sleeping, and programmed by the language to do it from a certain lens. We are co-creating as we think, speak, and write. So as we get more conscious of how we are being used by the language to propagate a consciousness that we are endeavoring to elevate ourselves above, we can reinvent words, reinvent language. Even Thomas Jefferson said something like, I have the quote, but not in front of me, new times require new words and the assignment of new meanings to old words, something like that. The recognition that the language needs tuning up, the earliest recognition I've come upon was Confucius, who said, if given charge of the governance of a country, the first thing he would do would be to correct the language. And he explains why. So we can do that and create a new vision of reality collectively.
Exactly. Laurel, do you see language in itself as evolving or devolving?
At the moment, it's definitely and probably intentionally, by quote, the powers that be, devolving. We may be getting more words, but so many of them are meaningless jibber jabber that people go into a war of words over. You didn't say it correctly, as the language is changing every day. I mean, anyway, I won't go into the absurdity, but I have some quotes, some wonderful statements about this. They're on my website, a whole collection of them. I think it's under information, words on words. There's a marvelous quote about, there's decline of a language is the decline of the life of the people that use it.
Well, one of the things that Gary and I are insistent on with everyone is their definitions that they use. So when someone comes upon you and they have a comment or a snide remark, whatever it might be, it's always about, well, what does that mean? What's your definition of that? Because we're finding that, just as you said, there's so much convolution in the meaning of words now. And it's constantly changing over and over again. And it's interesting, in my mind, in my recollection, I think it started with Bill Clinton when he was going, well, it depends on what your definition of is.
Right.
And I think that kind of started a small revolution of, oh yeah, so we can change those definitions. And we find that whether it be with politicians or marketing or, PR firms or whatever the case, of slowly just, making these slow incremental changes to specific words, and then their definition changes along with that. And sometimes it's on purpose, and sometimes it's kind of like, well, it's perhaps maybe a way of getting around a situation. But because of now we have, well, back then it was just television, but now we have social media, which is, is definitions on steroids. I mean, they're just kind of mutating every which way you turn. And that's where my question came from, because you've talked about in a lot of your previous interviews and on your YouTube channel, about how people are, the definitions and the words are being kind of manipulated, and people are being steered or
and steer is a castrated bull.
Yeah, exactly.
So don't be steered.
Well, so but that's part of one of my questions is, how do you come up with steer, a castrated bull, and steer the car?
How did that happen?
How do all of these happen where you're like, or as you mentioned and Gary mentioned, you have, days of the week. Well, okay, so
how did that come about?
How did they come up with the word week when they already had a definition?
See, a
How do you,
lot of people, all of my work is conjecture.
sure, based
And
on research though?
well, I've read a little bit, but it's
Okay.
more based on downloads
Sure.
and even as we speak. So a lot of people want to know who did this to us. And you can just imagine these, old wizards on high stools at desks with feathers in their manuscripts, manipulating language to manipulate the software programming of the mind. And to some degree, we know that happens, certainly on the level of sound bites and memes and just what you were speaking about, changing the meanings of words. I mean, I have to stop before I can continue on, because to point out that definition is we are deafened to our definitions. So how can we possibly be a sound mind?
Mhm.
And now we talk about what words mean. Let me read to you the opening from my little blog called The Mean Meaning of Mean. It's just a paragraph. And it says, in addition to intention and signification, mean also means offensive, selfish, nasty, small-minded, negative, stingy, ignoble, inferior in quality, of little importance, bad-tempered, in poor condition, shabby, and average. So do you still want to know what a word means? I mean, it's just hilarious. What it means to me is we need new language to evolve it. And one of the words is ignoble, which of course is the opposite of noble. And most nobility is ignoble, whether they're born into a royal bloodline or just the heirs of most of the world's wealth. They cannot be noble or nobility unless they follow the prescription in that word, which is no bull. It's unequivocal. You are either living in your high intention and integrity, then you are truly noble. But anything less does not make the grade.
Nice. Yeah, and you mentioned, so just one of the things, again, that I internally for myself and with certain people, I'll use the language in, because I think for the average person, the shock of, hey, have a good, strong beginning is too much of a shift for them, right? One of the things is when I hear, close friends, family, and colleagues doing things like, well, in the meantime, well, no, hold on, who's making time something that's mean, or how about doing it in the nice time? Because then we can enjoy the experiences.
Or we even already have the phrase in good time.
Yeah, in good time. Yeah.
So, and I completely agree. The closer we can get to the familiar sound, so it's like we're taking a flat note and tuning it up, sharpening it.
Right.
It's like it's a huge piano. Every key is a key of knowledge, the
Like
English language. And we talk about notes, we talk about composing, and we are the human instrument. We get to play the piano, and those vibrations we elicit move through the human instrument, and they play us organ by organ. So if the goal is to tune up and not to degrade, then go for the beauty, go for the sweetness, go for the kindness, go for the truth as you know it, from a place of nobility. When you know it energetically and essentially, and according to your essence, that this is authentic, That's what to share. Conjecture, gossip, rumor, what for? I have such a gorgeous quote. Let me see. Oh my goodness. Yes, I can find it.
So one of our listeners, Melanie, has a question. She goes, "What are your thoughts about the brain's inability to process negation, such as do not touch, and the brain perceives it as do touch? So rather than I am sick, stating I am not well."
Right. Or, yes, what do I think of it? That
Yes.
the brain, I think it's the brain. I'm sorry, am I interrupting?
No, go ahead, please.
Okay. So again, all conjecture. The brain, the subconscious creative mind, does not have an on-off switch. I once heard in my mind when I was at the beach, no is not the opposite. No, off is not the opposite of on, because there is no on and or off in spirit. The opposite of on is no, and that's a personal decision. So we may be speaking unconsciously using language that negates us. However, you can't turn the brain's creative power off. It's always on. So the no just gets dropped. That's your little hesitation or resistance. But the words, I feel like shit. And personally, I do not like to use language like that. It kind of hurts me energetically. It's ugly. I don't like ugly. So speak things in the most beautiful way that you can. And I remember hearing many times Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith saying, call it all good. And everything must work together for good for those who love Source, because we are creating with the power of the Creator. And when we do, we feel consciously. When we create, we feel divine. How could we not?
Indeed we do. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and we emphasize a lot that it's the more you can get out of the this or that model of the matrix, the more empowered you are and the closer you are to the source of who you are. And so it's a not this or that, it's a this and that and that and that and that, and they're all relevant to the infiniteness of who you are.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. And I think the do not, the negation thing, just on my answer on that, Melanie, is that through neurolinguistic programming, initially, I think when NLP first came out, there was a lot of that, the negation factor, that yes, your brain has to process the negation and bring it out, but it doesn't necessarily mean just because you say to someone, do not touch, that they'll actually touch it. It does put into their brain the process of, okay, what would touching it feel like, and then come back and then try not to do it, for sure. But based on a lot of variables in the moment, so it's contextual. It's based on what's happening in the moment, who's saying it, who's hearing it. There's a lot of variables to that kind of what we call negative suggestions. And so it's not as easy, cut and dry, as saying, yes, never use nots or always use nots, because there's times when it has value and times when it doesn't. So it's based on the context and everything involved in that particular context.
Yes. And so that then brings up, you do not touch. So how about a moment when everyone takes a look at the word touch and see if you can find its built-in expectation?
Ouch.
You got it right off the bat.
Yeah.
The major part of touch is ouch. So perhaps that's our fear of into me see. If you touch me, you're going to hurt me. And that's many of our early experience. So, and then the word close, let's all get close. But if you take another look at the word close and see what it tells you.
Or close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we need to be open to get close. But
Mhm.
there's something else also. There's close, and what else? In the word close, C-L-O-S-E.
Lose, see, lose.
Yeah, lose.
Mhm.
So you want to get close, but you close because you're afraid if you get seen, you'll lose.
Hmm.
So we've been trained to have faith in some invisible deity, benevolent boogeyman that's going to damn you for the smallest nothing. So we're trained to believe in that and not ourselves. But if we are a spark of that, and we turn the creative power of our attention to embrace that, to explore it, to exalt in it and expand in it, wow, what fun that is.
Yeah. For sure. That's awesome.
Oh, and with your word, imagination, or what
Imagination.
imagine, right? That's
I
wonderful.
magi. Yeah.
Yes. And what I've done with it is I had to add a letter at the end, but I'm a
Mm.
genie.
Mm.
And let's take another moment and for a little word play that everyone participates in. If you look at the word enigma, which it means a significant puzzle, take a look at the word enigma, which sounds so weird. I wonder if we sound like grunting pigs when we speak enigma to people who haven't heard the language. I mean, I've always wondered, what does this language sound like to an ear that's never heard it before? And I actually have written some foreign English for native speakers using words that you can't possibly know the meaning of and then defining them, but just to hear the sound of it. But so take the word enigma, a seemingly insoluble puzzle, and play with it and discover that it holds its own answer, what it will take to solve it.
That's cool.
So
That's
can
cool.
we take like a minute or so to do that, to look at enigma?
With enigma?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let me let's see. So Melanie says Amjin.
Getting close. I mean,
She says imagine.
yes,
That's cool.
that's it.
Yeah, nicely done, Melanie. Well done.
Melanie, please contact me. You're very
Nice.
interested. Yeah, it takes imagination to solve an enigma. And imagine is I'm a genius and or I'm a genie. And with you, it's Magi nation, a nation of Magi's, a nation of people with the magical power to connect and to co-create, commune, and elevate it collectively to the next level. So,
yeah, that's great. That's great.
That is wonderful. So are these creations of some of these words with these underlining definitions and meanings, is this on purpose?
Well, some most likely. But what came to me is that language is not only grammatical, it's hologrammatical as well. And so with those echoes and reflections, they become manifest in a vibration. And so we're seeing the reverberations of our own thought forms flashing back to us through the language. So I think that, and here's how I put it. So that guy, that editor in the 80s who wasn't interested in publishing psychosemantics English in translation, since I couldn't affix the 3 letters P, H, and D after my name. A few years later, I was a student of Reverend Michael Beckwith and his editor. And we, one of the class assignments was to do what this closer walk with God means to you. So I wrote a piece called First Person Singular that gave my early worldview, and then the pain it took me through, and then my evolution. It's called, First Person Singular. It's on YouTube. So I didn't think the poem was good. I had absolutely no self-esteem back then. I didn't really know I was intelligent because it wasn't reflected to me. And there was so many negative, dark projections of other people's stuff that I grew up with that I didn't have a clear sense of myself. And I came in with a very metaphysical perspective, which made this two-dimensional world even more confusing, especially all the naysayers around me, but it did set me on my path. So I turned everything, so I recited it somewhere. It was appreciated by a fellow named Matthew Marshall, who had a new age record label at the time called Virgin, it was purchased by Virgin, Higher Octave Music. He did it with a fellow named Dan Celine. And Matthew heard me perform First Person Singular and then contacted me to do an album of my verse. And he was enormously supportive. I didn't know. Anyway, after venting my rage at the state of the world in the first 2 poems and having Matthew say, wow, that's really dark, isn't it? I then put them away for 30 years. That's how much tolerance I had left in me for more criticism. So I then, or what I interpreted as criticism, I then decided to take everything I discovered about words and to turn that into verse. And I ultimately received $10,000 from him, and thus was born WordMagic. And in one of the first pieces I wrote related to words, it says somewhere in the middle, now from these words you may deduce I'm the metaphysical mother goose. And my poetry's a celebration of the English language in translation. For I know the wavelength on the English channel. So I'm here to Mother Goose our usage, to help turn the tide, since our current annals reveal what a twisted tongue produces. Now, I know that you won't be surprised to hear that we've been hypnotized. So the special thing I'm here to tell is that our words create the spell, and that our problems are compounded because English is confounded, for the echoes of our history and our psyche are resounded through the symbols of the alphabet, as well as through our puns, and yet few recognize what thoughts are stirred by the secret spells of the unheard word.
Nice. That's
Thank
beautiful.
you.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Thank you so much. That's the second half of called Abra Palabra, and I believe it's also on YouTube. And so, Ross, I did not forget your question I just gave it a preamble.
Mhm.
And amble is, to move kind of back and forth in
Mhm.
I wouldn't say lazy, a relaxed manner. Oh, there's a wonderful word for relaxation, or a phrase, Latin phrase, odium cum dignitate, leisure with dignity.
Hmm.
So I think that's
I
gorgeous.
like that.
Back to your question, Ross.
Sure.
In my very lengthy fairyography, my elemental archetypal avatar, I guess you'd say, her name is Philomela Nightingale, and Philomela is another term for the nightingale, and a very dark Greek myth. But in any case, she goes through a whole journey of discovery to find out how the English tongue got forked. That's what that chapter is about.
Okay.
I don't have much memorized about it, but I got the answer to your question of how I think it happens that these linguistic oddities occur. Looking at myself on Zoom, I see next time I have to get a little glass rather than a big bottle. So my apologies.
Okay, we use bottles as well.
Yeah, it's all good.
Thank you. So
That's great.
So here's that little piece that
Okay.
will give you a sense of my sense of why these words do this. Why do they migrate across continents, cultures, and centuries to come into the same vibration, even if they do not have a history in common? So I call them linguistic synchronicities. And at first, so my fairy says, I will give you 2 examples. These are favorite ones of mine. The fact that praying sounds so savage, but it also sounds divine. Or how about the way the prophet has become our bottom line?
Wonderful.
Now add worship or worship, parish or perish, and you'll soon understand why the world's so nightmarish.
Wow.
So it goes on from there. But the most relevant piece to answering Ross's question, at first, I suspected the hand of collusion, entangling the language to foster illusion. And I think it's quite true that a culture's theology has a great deal to do with the word's etymology and how it evolves over time to combine incompatible meanings that may undermine the original thoughts it was meant to define. But now I don't think it's planned. For the thing that I've found is that like concepts can vibrate at the very same sound and vibrate at the state that our mind designates. For words are electromagnetic vibrations whose fine alphabetic tintinnabulations can take on the tint of our true expectations, which they then imprint on our metal of mind, causing sounds to adhere when they're of the same kind. So this is a kind of alphabet algebra language. You may not get it all at once, but if you rehear it, it will open up chambers of your own consciousness, I believe. And on that video I posted, The Secret Spells of the English Language, I have that poem at the end of sharing the life sentence, and I recite it intact. I sort of dropped or mixed up a word here and there in this just a moment ago. So anyway, that's what I think.
That is wonderful.
Pretty cool.
Okay, so we are near, that was the fastest interview we've ever done. This has been,
Right.
an hour has already just blown by, and this was, we had so many comments. I could keep going for another hour. Laurel, what do you want? Do you want to give out your website, your contact information? We've been loading up the comments with a lot of your links already.
Oh,
How
wonderful.
can people find out more about you and this amazing knowledge you have?
Thank you. Let me just add something about time. It's so interesting. Time is hours.
Yes, it is.
You can drop the H or put it there.
Mhm.
If you turn time around, it's emit. And
Nice.
there's time, and this is the time for us to emit our message. So that's what I help facilitate at wordmagicglobal.com. I help you deconstruct your own programmed consciousness. Believe me, I'm
Sweet.
still in the process myself of
Yeah.
living what I know to be true, better every
Yeah.
day. wordmagicglobal.com. Every month I have 4-session writing circles. So we get to interact. You meet people from around the world. You'll be amazed at how they're gravitationally magnetized to a particular circle because of the resonance they hold with the people who are also magnetized. So there's
Nice.
amazing synergy that occurs. So I have 2 circles at the moment, and likely in October, I will once again teach, well, it's more share, my WordMagic wordplay sessions, wordplay that unravels mass hypnosis and elevates the frequency of consciousness. So if you subscribe to my website, wordmagicglobal.com, you can immediately download my free ebook, which is called The Book of E, a book of alphabet alchemy. You'll also see, if you scroll down the homepage, events, upcoming events. So next month there'll be September circles starting, and I have podcasts that post there, as I'm looking forward to posting this with Ross and Gary. So lots of good stuff. There's also a YouTube channel, and I have a Patreon page. And let me simply tell you, I started at 3 years old. I just turned 77. I believe
Yes.
I'll be here for a while. And I would very much appreciate people's contributions that will allow me to complete many projects and get them out into the world, so you and your future progeny have echoes and memories of this star-spangled language dancing.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That is
Nice.
fantastic. Well, we've already got comments asking for you to come back onto the show sometime, so that is definitely something that we are going to be putting into the into our calendar.
Yeah, you align with a lot of what we teach and what we share
Exactly.
on so many different levels. So yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Well, I'm delighted. It's so much fun to get to talk with people who get it and are already on the same wavelength. Then it's like, it's a sport. It's very entertaining. And I've said things I've never said or heard before. And for me to have new material to share requires a high level of interaction, it appears.
Awesome. Awesome.
Fantastic. That is
All right.
cool. Gary, any last comments for the show?
No, I think that's it. Oh, just to mention for those of you that are still here, that we do have our Badass Challenge coming up in a couple of weeks. We'll be letting everybody know about that very shortly. And yeah, and then I think next week it's you and I, right, Ross?
Yep,
We're not doing
we're back to our
we're back to
streams.
So next week it's the regular Hacking the Infinity Matrix live stream. So please join us for that. And yeah, and then we'll share more about the challenge on that stream and give you guys information how you can jump in and join on that.
And if I could just add, I welcome people's emails. However, I don't welcome emails I mean, it takes sometimes I let them linger a few days. So to
Yeah.
get my attention, if you wish to email me, please put WordMagic Global in the subject line and I won't miss it, or I'll do my best not to. And my email is my name at gmail.com.
Yeah, it's
So-
right at the bottom of
Awesome.
your screen as well. So Laurel
Thank you.
Airica at gmail.com. So we're going to sign off here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Laurel, hang on for just a second
Yes.
after the show so we can just give you a personal thank you. And that's the show. Everybody's got a lot of thinking to do now. And this is just ever fascinating.
So come back and join us every Thursday right
Yes,
here.
yes.
We're same time, and we always have something cool and new to share. So we'll
Thank
see
you.
everybody. And until next time, we challenge you, we dare you to be exceptional. And the only way you can do that is to implement what you learn and learn from what you implement.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay
We'll
well,
see you
everyone.
next week.
Well, you made it to the end of this interview, and that tells us one thing. You liked what you heard, and maybe, just maybe, you might want more of the same. So be sure to hit subscribe and ring that bell. As a matter of fact, you might be ready to step things up for yourself. You see, everyone that you've heard us interview for the Infinite Wisdom series all have one thing in common. They've harnessed their own potential, claimed their badass self, and raised their game and leveled up. Whether it be in business, personal, romantic, for whatever aspect of life you choose, there's always a next level. So we encourage you to rekindle your passion and purpose, step it up, and register for our next free 5-day Badass Challenge. The link is below, and we are excited to see you take a leap into a new reality that only you can imagine.